Hi there, and this session we're going to be looking at quality. Now quality, of course, first of all, is very important from a point of view ensuring it throughout the process as well as throughout the solutions. We'll look at these two different areas in a moment. But the first thing to note about quality, it is about fit for purpose. Because quite often we think about quality from a point of view like leather seats or, high gloss definition information, looking at stuff that's really on top of what we really need to have. So when we talk about fit for purpose and quality, it needs to do the job it has to do. No more, and certainly no less. Now, no more doesn't mean to say we can't do that, but what we've got to make sure is we certainly do not go no less. And we know how we do this. We prioritize for one thing, to make sure that we understand what the requirements are that have to be delivered for the solution to work. And of course, this is the very first part of it. So we're going to remind ourselves about that in a minute. So remember, when we're looking at quality, there are two aspects about it. But the first thing to think about is fit for purpose. Now, we're going through a bit of a high-level view overall of quality throughout a project at the moment. Some elements we'll look in different sessions in a little bit more detail to expand on them. And one or two we have already in other sessions anyway. So let's have a look at quality from a point of view of the quality we expect, why we need it from a solution perspective, and also from a process perspective too. So let's have a look at solution first of all. So when we talk about the solution, there are a couple of things we've got to think about. One is, how much do we understand about the quality as we go through the life cycle? This is obviously the first thing, but the other part is what type of quality solution do I need at the end? Now, I look at this in high level when we looked at the business options linked to, sort of the maintenance type of the solution I have. Do I want a strategic type solution, or I do a tactical, or something in between? So we're going to have a look at that again in a moment as well. But when we come to look at it as we go through the project, like everything in projects, like in most things really, it's about taking a step at a time and understanding the information a step at a time. That means not looking at the minute detail right at the very beginning of the project. So we're going to look at it through a life cycle perspective at the moment, first of all. So let's think about this. Quality from a solution point of view, let's look at the life cycle view of it. Okay, so in the very first instance, when we're looking at the requirement of the project, looking at the planning, starting up, feasibility, whatever you've put a name on the very first part of the project, this is when we get the information from the reference, terms of reference. We're now formalizing that information to get an understanding, a high-level view. So all we know at the project at the moment is actually the overall final solution we like to deliver, right? So when we look at the quality here, it's the quality, right, of the final solution, the final vision, right? What you might call the quality expected of the overall solution. What type of solution do I need to have in place? And of course, part of this is linked to the maintainability aspect of it. So we'll look at that in a moment to see the linkages. So it's the quality of the final vision solution. So it is very high level. Now, the rationale behind this, of course, so this is in the first phase. Right? I'll put the first phase here so you know what we're talking about, rather than try and go through all the different titles again. The very first part of the program, which is quite short and sweet. I need to know what the high level is. What's the business expecting? Because remember, the people who are going to supply the solution need to understand what that is and decide whether they can, or at least get some idea, whether they can actually supply it to that particular level of quality. And that's why it's linked to the maintenance. So we're going to look at that and link it again in a minute, but just looking at how much we need to know at the point of the project. So right at the very first phase, it's just the high level quality of the solution to get a good understanding whether this thing's going to be viable or not. That's really what we're doing. Right. Now, in the second phase, no, I'm doing this slightly backwards, but in the second phase, what we're now looking at is more detail of the quality, right? The quality expected now at the next level. So usually the next one or two levels of your products stroke requirements. And by that we mean that when we're drawing the project and breaking it down at this point, if you want to use that particular type of framework and looking at the products initially, because that's really what I'm looking at. Now, this is the overall final solution. So this is the deliverable. This is what we're going to deliver, the project here, right? And that really is the quality we need of it. We might have some idea of what the next level down is, because this is about all we'll know in the first phase, are the main solution and the major components of it. Like with a cake, we've got the sponge, the filling, the icing, and the candles. Or with a calendar, you know, we have the 12 months. Or with a new sort of application document, got the form filling, you know, terms and conditions, legalities, who can fill it, how to fill it, all these things. These are the major areas, you know, what they call major products, high level requirements, whatever it is. That's the next layer down, right? And when we get into the second phase, right, I'll put a different color here. For example, we start to break down those products into a few levels downwards, right? Now, depending on how much we want to break down and where we are, we'll only probably concentrate on a couple of levels down in more detail, because we need to get a reasonable understanding from the people who are going to supply the solution, how that's going to work for us. Again, more detail. Because remember, at the end of the second phase, when we're going through the design, by the end of that second phase, when we're doing a lot of planning, understanding the whole project in more detail, but relevant detail, enough of the detail, and primarily the first couple of segments we're going to go through, increment stages, then that's where we need the detail to be able to confirm what we're going to do. In other words, decide the quality, but at that moment in time, right? Decide the quality at that moment in time, right? And how it's going to work, okay? It helps them to understand a lot more about what can be or cannot be attained with the amount of budget we have, the time frame we've got, the type of solution that the business wants, right? And it's only when we get into the nitty gritty, right, into the development phase. So now we're in the third one, the third phase. I'm going to write this word here, develop, because this is when we're going to build the solution, right? Now we look at the requirements, because now we know the requirements, if you like, features, products, anyway. We're going to look at those in more detail for each one. So now at this point we have detail, quality, right? Therefore, the acceptance criteria as well. Now, acceptance criteria for each requirement, per requirement. Because now we get into that time box or that work package, it's only then we're really interested in what that particular quality is. No point in worrying about it or getting concerned about it beforehand, partly because we might not build that, partly because we might not even get to that part of the project. Scope may change. So let's concern ourselves with the immediate future as we go through. Now, obviously keeping that in mind because there are linkages. But what we're now looking at is the detailed acceptance criteria for each particular requirement, product or feature when we're in the build phase, right? Within that specific, so for specific time frame, time box, stroke work package, right? Time box, stroke work package. Time box, work package. For the requirements in that. Because now we know what we're building in that particular time slot, so let's concern ourselves with the acceptance criteria at that point, okay? Now, this is all linked, obviously, to what we may decide from a maintenance point of view, right? At the beginning of the project. So again, similar to the phase systems up here, what we need to do up here is understand what type of solution we may need to have in place. So it's linked to the high level, how it is, because we're still defining all this in the first phase. Remember, we did a lot of defining. So the maintenance is actually linked to what type of solution do I want? Do I want strategic, right? Something like deliver now, and then we'll beef it up later, re-engineer afterwards. Or really just a tactical throwaway solution, So strategic, you know, on a brand new website, or the document's got to be a longevity on the document, the information's got to be accurate, it's got to last us at least 2 or 3 years or whatever it happens to be, right? Therefore, usually a lot of project costs, as we saw, at this point in time, especially when I put a brand new bathroom in, for instance. You want to change your bathroom completely, that's going to be quite a high cost in the project. But the point is, you're saying to yourself, well, if I'm going to hang around the house for another 10 years, it's going to be very low maintenance costs afterwards. It's going to be fully able to run on its own for the next 10 years, hopefully, maybe a quick change here and there. But, it's quite different. Whereas the tactical one, it may well be that I'm just going to get a quick competition page out on my website. This document's an interim thing for a specific function, only for the short term. Or I'm just going to give my bathroom a quick lick of paint because I'm selling the house. The future of it is not too much of a concern to me right now. So these are the three different levels you're going to consider. Firstly, you're going to define them here in the first phase through the requirements planning phase, at the beginning of it. Then at the next part, with the initiation phase, I should say, I beg your pardon. So the first phase is the requirements, the initiation phase. When you get into doing the real planning, in doing the design work, then you'll start to understand a lot more about what that maintenance should be at this point and make a decision. But remember, you're not locking it in completely. You can change that at some point, right? You can change that at some point. So if that needs to be, let's get an understanding on now and then move on with it. So we've got these three different levels, 1, 2, and 3. Right? So we decide on this by the end of the second phase once we've closed the planning down. But remember, it can be reviewed as we go through. We need to change it. But now the quality of the requirements as we go through the phases themselves need to link to what this is and therefore put the acceptance criteria around for each specific requirement. Now, one of the things that needs to go on throughout to ensure the quality, of course, is to follow up with testing. All right? Follow up with testing. So there are all sorts of different forms of testing. We can have fast fail. Fast fail testing is a good approach to take. It can usually be sort of collaborative testing, collaborative testing, independent testing, repetitive testing, so we can repeat things, so repetitive testing. We can have something called test-driven development as well, which sort of seems a bit odd. Because sometimes we think about building it and then testing to make sure it works, right? But if we take the acceptance criteria and understand the tests we need to have in place to ensure that it passes the test, it will pass the acceptance criteria, then we can go and build it until it passes. It's quite a bit different way of looking at it in some respect, but may not seem that different. So we have test-driven development. So whatever test systems you may have in place, but do remember, you need to test throughout. And this is linked into iterative development. So each time we go through an iteration, one of these loops, we need to really be testing before we go to the review. Because remember, we're taking the requirement as we build it to the business to say, how do you like that map? How do you feel this is actually building at the moment? You like it? Can you sign off? Can we get on to the next bit? Or do you want to make some changes? This is the real thing key about iterative development, is we can make changes if the business need it, while we're in the process of building. Yes, we know what the knock-on effect is probably in time frame, but we have the contingency within the time frame from a scope point of view to help us cope with that variation in getting a requirement built, right? But there's some other ways of testing. So remember, when we're in this particular phase, we're not actually building anything, even here, right? But there are ways of testing in here. So there are ways of using modeling, etc., and prototypes to test the understanding. This is testing in the understanding of the solution, usually very early on, and even through time boxes, cardboard cutouts, matchsticks, men, wireframes, whatever you're going to be using, give them shells of how it might look, because once people see it actually down there, quite often the thought processes change a little bit, right? And begin to think, well, maybe that's not quite what I thought. Again, this is taking a sort of a touchy-feely, step-by-step approach. Iterative approach, if you like, if you want to take the same sort of mechanism. But testing, look at the different types of tests you have in place. We'll look at these in more detail in a different session. But understand that testing goes on throughout the process, throughout the whole project, needs to, right? Testing the understanding, testing the solution, both at the build level, both at the completion level from the end of a time frame, like a stage or an increment, before you release it into pilot or whatever you're going to do with it. And certainly before you release into operational mode, wherever that happens to be throughout the deployment phase that you're using, whatever phases. We're always going to deploy throughout the project, really. This is the practical thing, where possible, of course. So bear this in mind. So in this particular session, we've looked at the quality fit for purpose from a solution perspective, the high-level understanding of the detail, and break it down as we go through the different phases where it's relevant to get enough information. Linked to the type of solution I need at the end, from a strategic type solution down to a tactical one, depending on what you're looking to do, right? But remember, it's always about a point in time. It's getting an understanding, getting a sign-off, working from a baseline after the design planning phase, if you like, right? And then we run whatever it is we've planned to do to build the solutions we go through with that in mind. And if we need to make adjustments, this is the whole point. We're allowing ourselves to make those adjustments as we go through. Right. In the next session, we'll look at quality from a process perspective as well.